Hello everyone. I can't believe that I'm sitting here making a video about this particular subject. This isn't the sort of thing that I would have expected would become an issue in general, especially in my lifetime. But here I am, and I'm deeply concerned about some things that I've been reading lately, some broader sort of social trends that seem to be slowly bubbling up to the surface. Now, I'm not saying that this is a widespread thing, but I'm seeing the precursors of it. I'm seeing it, and something in my mind is telling me this is the canary in the coal mine. And so I'm here to tell you, stop normalizing pedophilia. I'm going to let that phrase hang there in the air for a minute. Because some of you who are listening to me might ask me, who the hell is normalizing pedophilia? I imagine, and I think rightly so, that most people in the world, most human beings in the world, hear things about child molesters and sexual abuse of minors and immediately feel this sort of violent rage building within them, or else a sort of horrible vomiting sickness. You know, it's a terrible thing. Like even trying to imagine some of those things in my mind is just terrifying to me. It's disgusting, right? Nobody is looking at that. You would tell me, maybe you'd tell me, that nobody is looking at pedophilia and saying, oh, this should just be normal. But that's not the case. And I want to make my case. I want to make my case very thoroughly, because I've seen some things, and these things are very disturbing to me. They're very wrong. So as I'm sitting here, I don't really have a script for this. I'm just kind of rambling train of thought. I'm going to let these things kind of work themselves out, and you're going to hear me kind of stumble through my thought process, and hopefully I can make some sense of it. But I have some articles here. I have one article in particular that I found, or that was sent to me from a friend, and I'll leave a link to it in the description box down below in case you want to read it, but I'm gonna comment on it here. This was sent to me by a friend of mine. Now before I get into this, okay, I guess I should lay out some truths here. Obviously, I think pedophilia is bad. I don't feel like I need to say that, but apparently I need to say that. I pride myself on having a lot of friends from all over the ideological spectrum. I know some people who are very, very far left, progressive, social justice minded people, and I respect them immensely. I have some other friends who are extremely far right-wing, radical, evangelical types who, well, if you know the type, you know what I'm talking about. And I respect them too, and I love them very much. I have friends and family on both sides of the spectrum, people who, and everyone in between. I myself have undergone quite a significant shift in my own ideological positions over the years. As I've gotten older, I've found myself leaning more and more really centrist is a good way for me to describe that. I would consider myself an ardent centrist. I'm not a radical left-wing type. I'm not really the sort of person who's going out and banging the social justice drum, but I'm also not necessarily unconcerned with problems like inequality or poverty and homelessness and those sorts of things. In my line of work, I tend to work with a lot of people who have been disenfranchised and excluded from society in one way or the other. And so I see a lot of that sort of, I see that side of society a lot more, and I see the consequences of it. And so I'm deeply concerned with those things. And so in those respects, I would consider myself somewhat left-wing. However, I tend to be a much more fiscally conservative person in terms of my politics, and I tend to also be sort of a libertarian in my views of the government. I don't generally trust the government broadly, and I think they should just stay out of my business because I don't think they do a very good job running most things. So in that case, I lean a little bit more right-wing, and so there's kind of this weird tense balance between intervention and libertarianism. And so I would consider myself, I suppose, a classic British liberal, but really an ardent centrist is a good way to say that. And I'm willing to have a conversation with most people about most things. So long as you're willing to be respectful, I'm happy to talk about just about anything. Let's get to the bottom of some issues. Let's talk about foundational things. Let's talk about philosophy, theology, or whatever you want to talk about. Politics, fine. I'm open to it. I love talking about that stuff, and I think it's very helpful and very edifying. But this particular issue here, this is where I draw the line. I have to draw a line somewhere, and this is where I have to draw a line. These things are unacceptable. There is no discussion to me about the potential for things like pedophilia to be either considered normal or okay or natural. It's not. It's not, and it's not okay. And so the thing that's brought all of this up for me is this particular article that was this was actually sent to me by one of my fairly right-wing friends, so it's on Fox News of all places, which really disturbs me because I would have expected this to be coming from a more left-wing sort of publication. I'm not sure why, but in any case, it doesn't really matter. So the article is titled, Mary Kay Letourneau relives brutal time in prison after student-teacher romance in new documentary. And this is by Stephanie Nolasco from Fox News. Now, I don't know who that is. I don't know what her history of contribution is. I know nothing about her or anything she's written, so this is not directed at her necessarily, though it is because she's the one who's writing the article. My issue is specifically with the issues addressed in this article. Okay. Now, a brief history of this, as best as I understand it from the research I've done. Mary Kay Letourneau was an elementary school teacher in Seattle back in the late 90s, who began a sexual relationship with a 12-year-old male student. And as a result of that relationship, she was arrested and sentenced to something like 8 years in prison. And then she was released. And then she continued to pursue a relationship with this student. And so now there's this group of people who are coming out and trying to make a documentary about the things that have happened to her. And the thing I find disturbing about this article, well, you know what? Let's go through it. Let's go through the article. We'll go through it piece by piece and we'll talk about it, okay? So if you see the link in the description and you want to follow along, that's great. I'll try to read as clearly as I can. So the article leads out with Mary Kay Letourneau, the Seattle elementary school teacher who was convicted in 1997 of raping her 6th grade student, is ready to share her side of the story. Let's stop right there. Why is a rapist, a convicted rapist, being given the opportunity to share their side of the story? I don't care what your side of the story is. If you raped someone, you don't get a side to your story. You did something wrong, you did something reprehensible, you did something absolutely disgusting. You should be sent away to prison for a very long time, and you should be shunned from broader society for the rest of your life because you are a garbage human being. That's my view on that. I don't think it's a very bold one, but I imagine I'm going to piss someone off, and I really don't care, because I stand by that. In an A&E biography, this is the article again, titled, biography special titled Mary Kay Letourneau Autobiography, a 2-hour confession set to debut Tuesday night. I'm guessing that was either this week or maybe next week. The 56-year-old recounts her tumultuous headline-grabber past. Letourneau shocked the world when at age 34 she began an affair with 12-year-old Vili Fulau. I think I'm pronouncing that name right, but correct me if I'm wrong. I want to make sure I get this correct. But let's stop again. We're, what, 4 sentences in? 4 sentences? 3 sentences in. All right. Let's look at the phrasing in this sentence. People who are listening to me might say, why do you think they're normalizing pedophilia? This sounds like they're asking someone to give their side of the story. This is what I mean by normalizing. This sentence right here, this perfectly encapsulates what I mean by that. Okay. Letourneau shocked the world when, at age 34, she began an affair with 12-year-old Vili Fulau. Now, let's switch genders. Let's say that Vili Fulau was the teacher and Mary was the student. Vili Fulau shocked the world when at age 34 he began an affair with 12-year-old Mary Letourneau. Do you see the issue in this sentence? Do you see a problem there? Because I do. It's a subtle one. It's the word affair. Why are we using the word affair to refer to someone raping a child? Why is that acceptable? It's not. Not in my mind. But apparently, it's perfectly okay. Because they continue to use this word throughout the article. It's thrown in there. Affair, romance, forbidden romance, all this stuff. It just keeps coming up. They're using this, but never once in there are they really emphasizing the fact that she was 34 and he was 12 years old, and that's rape. It just is. Okay? I'm going to keep going, and you're going to see how much worse this gets. Their relationship ultimately sent her to prison for nearly 8 years before the controversial couple married on May 20th, 2005. He was 22 by then. The pair now share 2 daughters. In the documentary, Letourneau detailed how her forbidden romance with Fulau... Oh, God, it disgusts me. It's disgusting. How can you use the word romance to describe a sexual relationship with a child? That's unacceptable, and anyone who can write those words with conviction should be deeply ashamed of themselves and the disgusting nature of their mind. There is nothing romantic in this situation. This is a child. It's disgusting. I'm going to scroll down here a little bit. So on and so forth, blah, blah, blah. I apologize for the dead space here. I'm just going to keep going down here because there's a few other things in here that I would like to do this. Okay. Letourneau was a married mother of 4 when her relationship with Fulau began. She was arrested in March 1997 after a relative of her husband, Steve Letourneau, notified police. She gave birth to a daughter, Audrey, in May 1997 while out of jail on bail. Okay, she had a child from a 12-year-old boy. I'm going to let you think about that for a while. Letourneau eventually pleaded guilty to 2 counts of second-degree child rape and was sentenced to 6 months in jail. 6 months. 6 months in jail for 2 counts of child rape. But as a part of her plea bargain, Letourneau agreed to avoid any further contact with Fulau, a condition she violated in 1998 when she became pregnant a second time by Fulau. That resulted in her prison sentencing. Okay, so here we go now. Here comes the rest of it, right? So some people are going to say, well, you know, it's different because he was a boy and she was a teacher and maybe she was going through a lot and maybe there was some things and so they put her away for a little while and it was a slap on the wrist, but it was enough. Then she was really going to try very hard. No, she wasn't going to try. And I'm sorry for my language here, but this is so infuriating to me. She wasn't going to try. She got out of jail and immediately went and had sex with the kid and got pregnant again. It's wrong. It's disgusting. It's horrible. He would have been, 13, 14 at the time? No, dude, just no. Violated in 1998, then she got sentenced to prison. Okay, great. So now she's in prison. But then they carry on, and this is what I mean by normalization, okay? They start presenting her as a human being. They start presenting the human, natural side of her. Now, look, anyone who knows me really well, anyone who's sat down and had a decent conversation with me, which is most people who I would consider friends or acquaintances, would know I am the sort of person who's concerned very much with treating people with human decency and treating people as human beings, okay? And I can't believe that I have to sit here and qualify this, but I feel the need to qualify this. I spend most of my time trying my best to talk to people who are broadly by society rejected and dehumanized, okay? And I take a lot of pride in the work that I do, and I work very hard at it. And when it's become such a big part of my life that I've intended to devote the rest of my career to it. Okay, so when I'm the person who's sitting here talking about this, understand I am not the kind of person who's going out and just throwing people in the garbage. Okay? I do everything I can, as much as possible, to interact with and to humanize people who, on the whole, are rejected by our society. But this is where I draw the line. It's child molestation, okay? That's a real easy line to draw. A super courageous position for me to take, I know, right? Apparently it is. I don't know. This is what I mean, okay? They're trying to humanize her. They're trying to show the human side of her. So it says, Abramson, that's the guy who's making this documentary, said Letourneau, now working as a paralegal, insisted she felt injustice and betrayal when she lost contact with her children at the time of her sentencing. Okay. Let's change the genders again. A man molests a child. The court takes all of their children away from them, and they go to prison. Do you care in that instance whether he felt it was unjust for him to not have contact with his children? I sincerely doubt you do. And that's the problem. For some reason, the way this is written, okay, there's like this glowing halo around this person. That it's just okay, oh, she felt so much pain and sadness and injustice. Good. She should. She should suffer. She should feel sadness. She should feel pain. She should feel absolutely miserable because she deserves it as the disgusting piece of garbage human being that she is. She molested a child. We're going to keep scrolling down here, yada, yada, yada. Okay. This is Abramson, the guy who writes and directs the documentary. He comments, he says, I think the media wanted to see her as a very one-dimensional character in this story. The older female teacher, the rapist. And by definition, yes, she is that. Right there. You can stop the sentence. You're done. You've made your point. That's the whole point. That's the only point that needs to be made. You're done. But no, he carries on. He says, but I think she found her soulmate. At least that's what she says. This actually makes me ill. Like, this makes me feel unwell reading this stuff out loud. This is not okay. Again, switch the genders on this. If you think that this is okay, switch the genders on this and tell me that you think a 34-year-old man having sex with a 12-year-old girl is finding his soulmate. And tell me if you think that that's acceptable. That should be socially acceptable and we should just be okay with that. Tell me honestly that you think you can do that. You can't. You just can't. And if you can, well, you're wrong. And you should be ashamed of yourself. Letourneau also claimed in the documentary that she didn't think the forbidden romance could result in an arrest. Oh, really? You didn't think so? Why? You thought you were going to get away with it? Oh my God. Nowadays, we hear so many similar stories over the past 20 years, said Abramson, especially female teachers and young male students, but I think it was unheard of at the time. In her mind, it was consensual, even though obviously at the age of 13 you can't give consent, but in her mind it was all about love. Why are you trying to share the side of the person who molested a child? This article carries on for a very long time. Okay, and so then they start in with this wild, just victim-blaming stuff. Okay, listen to this. Letourneau went on to claim how the then-teenager instigated the relationship with his increasingly aggressive advances. Folau allegedly bet with one of his friends that he could seduce his former teacher. One thing that surprised me was that first encounter, said Abramson, how he flirted with her, or she says he flirted with her, and he wanted to kiss her first. I think she was pulled to something about him, and I can't say what it is. I don't think she can say what it is, other than the essence of him that she connected with. He's an artist, and I think she was pulled towards him in some greater way. This was not a repeat offender. She was pulled to this person her whole life. So I think when she told the anecdote of how their relationship escalated, that to me made me understand her more. Okay, first of all, she is a repeat offender. She got sentenced to prison and then went back and then had sex with the guy and then went to jail. Or she got sentenced to jail, was released after 6 months, went back, had sex with the kid again, raped the kid again, and then was sentenced to prison. And then, after that, stayed in contact with him and manipulated him into lifting the order of protection and then married him. Okay, that's the very definition of a repeat offender. You were told not to do a thing, you were punished for doing the thing, then you were released, then you did the thing, then you went back to prison, then you were released, and then you did the thing again. That's a repeat offender, you stupid jackass. Okay. But let's start in with the rest of this, okay? Letourneau went on to claim, they're basically saying that this kid, this 12-year-old kid, initiated the relationship first. Okay, I was a 12-year-old boy once. Okay, I was a 13-year-old boy once. There is a point in your life as a young man, about the age of 12 or 13, when you hit this thing called puberty. It's a developmental stage in the sexual maturation process of being a man. Okay, you get this huge rush of testosterone, and suddenly you find two things. You either want to punch everything in the face, or you want to have sex with everything that moves. And sometimes it's both of those things together at the same time. And that carries on pretty much for your whole adult life as a man, especially if you have a lot of testosterone. You just learn ways as you get older to sort of subsume that thing into something else. For me, it's going to the gym, it's playing a lot of instruments, it's doing this kind of thing. Like, you learn how to control those urges and put them aside. But that's part of growing up as a man. When you hit a certain age, you have a sudden sexual awakening, and it's like, holy crap, man, this is what's going on, right? Okay, so this stuff happens. The problem is when you are 12 years old, when you're 13 years old, your brain isn't fully developed yet. You don't have a brain yet. You don't have a prefrontal cortex. You don't have the ability to think ahead to the future. I've talked to 13-year-olds, okay? I've worked with them occasionally through my job. I know what they're like. They don't plan for the future, okay? A 13-year-old is thinking max, like a week ahead, okay? They're not thinking about 5 years down the line. And if they try to make a plan for 5 years down the line, the chances that they follow through on that plan are zero. It doesn't happen, okay? You don't have the proper executive functioning process in your brain. You don't have the capability to think about the consequences of your actions, the long-term effects of things that you're doing. You don't have any of that. It's not developed yet. So you have this weird balance where it's like all of a sudden you have this massive sexual awakening and you are capable of performing certain acts, but you are absolutely not in the place psychologically where you should ever be making those decisions. And we have decided broadly as a society that there does come an age where you are capable of making those decisions. It's when you turn 18. Okay, and even that is a little shaky. Sometimes I think it should be a little bit older, but regardless, culturally we seem to be pretty okay with the 18 years old thing. That's fine. Not when you're 13. The maturity difference between an 18-year-old and a 13-year-old is just it's beyond comprehension, right? Okay, a 13-year-old has lived 13 years. An 18-year-old has lived 5 years longer than that. That's more. It's almost half again as long as a 13-year-old, okay? And if you're thinking about this, realize that 13-year-old, like 4 years ago, was 9, watching Saturday morning cartoons or doing whatever the hell it is kids do now. I don't know what kids do now. The point is, when you're 13, you can't make that decision. If this teacher is experiencing a sexual attraction to a 12-year-old, and again, let's remember, this is a 12-year-old at first and then a 13-year-old later. If this teacher is experiencing a sexual attraction to that person, that is a mental illness, and it's not it's not even a mental illness. It's just wrong. It's a perversion. It's disgusting. You're not a human being, okay? If you are acting on a sexual attraction to children, you are not a human being. I'm sorry, you lose your agency as a person at that point. I will now and forever consider people who have sex with children to be monsters. You are a disgusting monster and you should be ashamed of yourself. And I think that's just a thing that we decided broadly as a society, and yet somehow here's some people trying to normalize this. And this is the problem, okay? This article is just disturbing. This is ridiculous. And things like this, okay. Abramson hopes the documentary will show viewers a new side to Letourneau and Folau, one rarely covered by the press. Okay, I don't care what the other side is. She had sex with a 12-year-old boy. She had a kid from that sexual relationship. Actually, I think she had 2 kids from that relationship at least. And that's not okay. Normalizing pedophilia, not acceptable. And the fact that this is becoming a thing, that this is starting to emerge. This isn't even the only article I've seen, but I can see this video's already gone on for 25 minutes with me just railing on this one article. So I'm going to go ahead and stop here in a minute or two. But, there's more articles on this. There's one from In Touch Weekly. Now, granted, I don't know. This looks like a friggin' tabloid, but, it's things like this where she's just going through and the kid is talking about, after the kiss, we made it official that we're kind of a thing, and then talking about how she landed in prison and how their relationship is going and they're working through issues, and it's just not how she loves him and everything else. It's disgusting. It's just disgusting. Okay? If normalizing pedophilia is what we're going to aim for as a society, then our society is going to burn itself to the ground. If we don't have the moral fortitude and wherewithal to draw a hard line in the sand and say this is unacceptable, then where do we draw the line? Where do we stop? At some point we have to say, these things are not okay, and you cannot do them. So I'm drawing the line. Don't normalize pedophilia. It's wrong. It's disgusting, and you should be ashamed of yourself.